Thank you very much, Nathan. I've now got my slides up. Welcome, everyone. I hope people are staying safe. I would normally start with an acknowledgement of the traditional owners. Obviously, we're spread over a number of different lands, so I thought maybe I'd just start by acknowledging all the work that is being done by the essential workers at the moment as we fight coronavirus. And because it's such a challenging time for everyone at the moment, it is really nice to be able to spend an hour or so talking with you about a very positive development that's happened in sort of my area of interest over the last 18 months, and that is to talk with you about a new Cooperative Research Centre that has been was announced in March of this year around transformations in mining economies. For those of you who know quite how proud I am to work for the Sustainable Minerals Institute, this is not branded in purple because I have to say getting a Cooperative Research Centre up is very much cross-institutional activity and a team sport, and getting the CRC together has been the number of people who've been involved in getting this CRC up is immense, and they come from many institutions around Australia and industry, not least the University of Western Australia that shared leadership of this bid with the University of Queensland. What I'm going to talk about is kind of summarised here. I'm just going to quickly explain what a Cooperative Research Centre is, then talk more specifically about CRC TiME, and then I thought I'd touch on what opportunities does this represent for researchers, and then a little bit about what happens next. I think a Cooperative Research Centre, the reason why I'm very excited about this is that CRCs are really the way that the federal government makes its largest grant into the research sector and the grant is typically multiple millions of dollars over multiple years, 7 to 10 years. And the goal of a Cooperative Research Centre is to build scale of effort onto a particular topic of relevance to Australia. So many of you may have been involved with CRCs in the past, CRC ORE, for example, or the Deep Exploration Technology CRC, or the MinExC is one that was granted recently, which is a CRC looking at increasing Australia's prospectivity by getting really good at doing our mineral exploration. So a CRC is the U-boot, in a way, of research funding, but it comes with responsibility, and the responsibility is it's not a pot of money that goes to a single institution. It's not a playground for researchers to put in all their pet projects. It's a very mission-directed research vehicle that is required to access capability from multiple organisations in order to deliver industry-defined research. So it's great that we've got this one up, Transformations in Mining Economies. I'll talk a bit more now about CRC TiME. The vision around CRC TiME is actually a vision of regional development in areas that have been really dependent on mining activity for a significant period of time. A couple of things make me think that actually getting the CRC up now is because its time had come, if you see what I mean. In 2019, the federal government published a National Resources Statement that was talking about how to create a prosperous future for Australia off the back of its resources. And in that document, one of the things I detected was a shift in the narrative, a shift away from solely thinking about productivity and economic growth through mining, to talking much more about the role that mining can take in creating economic development in regions and global prosperity through a global resource sector. And so CRC TiME, its vision is about enabling regions and communities to transition to a post-mining future, because for us, closing the mine life cycle is one of the things that will enable the resources sector to continue confidently into the future. We've also did a lot of thinking about the size of a global market for closure and environmental and post-closure services. And as mines around the world are coming to their economic end, mine closure is becoming a bigger and bigger issue globally. And we estimate there's $1 billion market out there for services and technologies that can promote vibrant post-closure outcomes through really effective closure and operations. So that's kind of really by way of saying that as a CRC, we're looking to support what I see as a very exciting shift in narrative about not just about how do we open mines and develop commodities and export them, but also how do we see that industry as an agent of regional development, something that doesn't stop when the mine closes. What's unique with this CRC is that in order to really begin thinking about what can we do during mining to facilitate post-mining outcomes for all, we have to really look at integration. And we also have to look at integration through a partnership that involves many different sectors of our society. One of the big challenges that we've always seen to the delivery of a positive post-mining future has been under business as usual. There are a series of disconnects in the mine life cycle. And the disconnects can come about because of challenges in different stakeholder groups talking to each other, challenges in connecting different aspects of the mine life cycle to each other so that we look after long-term risk while we're dealing with short-term operational activities. And also disconnects between the different disciplines on site. So a whole range of disconnects. So if the problem is disconnection, the solution has to be around interconnection and integration. And one of the things that we've done with CRC TiME is pull together a partner base. There's actually about 75 partners in the CRC, and they come from, we organise them into 5 different sectors. The mining companies, and they're on the slide you will see the major mining companies are all represented in this CRC and are some of the biggest contributors. The research community, and you'll see that the major research institutions working in the resources sector are reflected in our research partnership. We have some very strong partners coming in from the mining equipment, technology and services sector, including some of the large companies, Downer and Orica, the kind of contract miners and service suppliers, as well as small, innovative, nimble, flexible companies such as DESIC. We have representations from all the state governments except New South Wales, and I think New South Wales will come on as we move forward. And then probably most excitingly, we actually have a very good representation from regional and community groups who are very excited about the idea of having a place where they can enter into dialogue a single place where they can enter into dialogue with industry and governments and met services companies. So the partnership is a really key aspect of the CRC, and the principle of doing integrated research in order to reconnect things is a really important principle of the CRC. And one final principle that's really important is that we are actually really looking at focusing into the major iconic mining regions around Australia. There's one missing on there at the moment, and if anybody is there from the Northwest Mineral Province, that'll be, we're hoping to get that identified as one of the regional hubs in the CRC over the next year or so. The reason why this regional approach is very important for the CRC is because it means we can engage the regional and community groups in a conversation that is relevant to them and their place and their country. So in each of these regional areas, we've really worked to make sure that our partners include representatives from the region, from local government in those areas and local businesses. And one of the reasons why these groups have come into the partnership to take the CRC forward is because we're really working to try and embed their visions of the future into mine planning and operations. And this cartoon here, we've been working with the Aboriginal Enterprises in Minerals and Energy. They're a partner in the CRC, and Barry Aegis, who leads that group, does all his communication through cartoons. I think he's got a cartoonist on speed dial somewhere. And in the course of 1 hour's conversation with him, he'd had this cartoon knocked up showing what he wanted to see coming out of the CRC for transformations in mining economies. And I think it's been a really nice way of demonstrating the aspirations of the regional community groups from this CRC, plus the fact that, of course, as we all know, the impact of mining doesn't end when the mining operation stops. In order to get a Cooperative Research Centre up, you have to put a lot of effort into thinking about and quantifying the level of impact you think is possible through this CRC for the Australian economy. So we've done a very structured exercise looking at identifying the impacts. And we've come up with this number of 2.4 billion, which is a very large number, and it's the one that certainly most of the media that I've done since we've got this CRC announced, the media tend to focus on that number. That number does not come from a single source of impact. It comes from a range of value that we hope the CRC will deliver. If we can close the mine life cycle effectively, then it begins to really address something that concerns people when they're thinking about the social license of the mining sector. If we can address that, then it begins to increase certainty for people who might want to be investing in new operations going forward. There's a large value in delivering that level of impact, particularly if you think about continued investment in Australian resources. We all hear conversations about the $1 billion of unfunded liabilities left around Australia. If we can improve the way in which mines are not just closed, but relinquished, then we can start to reduce the risk of long-term unfunded abandoned mines for the states. There's a whole swag of value that can come from this CRC, which is much more difficult to quantify in terms of ecosystem services, Indigenous livelihoods, closing the gap. These are very difficult to quantify in a way that is meaning for the people, has meaning for the people that are most impacted or most concerned about those areas. And of course, as I've mentioned before, we see huge value if we can ensure that the global met sector remains at the forefront of a billion-dollar marketplace for mine closure and rehabilitation. So what are we going to do? Well, we've developed an integrated research framework that has 3 programs in it. The first program is really around developing a shared vision for a regional economic future post-mining. So this is where we will be really working to bring people into discussions to understand how people's values differ, to think about how can we put all those different values into a single frame. Can we do that, or are they actually incommensurable? How are we best positioned within our policy and regulatory frameworks to help people move, as I say, not just to close a mine, but to relinquish a mine, to have a successful post-mining future, to be aware of cumulative and long-term impacts in and across the mining region, a whole swag of issues, which it's not that work isn't being done there at the moment, but the CRC can bring scale to those conversations and integration across jurisdictions to those conversations. The second program around risk evaluation and planning is really, okay, if in program 1 we identified the things that are important for a post-mining future, how do we make sure that we're valuing them in the way we go about mining operations whilst we are mining? So this is about understanding how do you, for example, factor in long-term risk to decisions that you might be making in the short term about where you're going to put your tailings dams, or what kind of processing technique you're going to use, how are you going to progressively rehabilitate. So program 2 is largely desk-based, but it is really about getting into the mine planning and scheduling process to try and build this vision of post-mining consequence into the mine planning process in a very meaningful way. And then program 3 is a program where we will be looking at developing the sort of primarily technological solutions that can be implemented during a mine operation to intervene at an appropriate point in the mine operation in a way that will either reduce risk or promote a positive outcome post-closure. So this is where we might look at desulfurizing tailings, for example, in order to reduce acid rock drainage. We could look in more detail about how do we begin to understand the ecosystem that we want to develop in the long term, and what do we need to do to make sure that we're really creating a substrate in the mining area that will proliferate that. Landform construction is the stuff that we can be doing during mining to improve our ability to have safe and stable landforms post-mining. So program 3 is probably the area where you know, the environment centres and the production centres at the Sustainable Minerals Institute could say that's their meat and drink of their research, really. Integration, core principle for the CRC, and so around these 3 programs we're going to be establishing a cross-cutting platform, and that cross-cutting platform will be looking at making sure we establish the collaboration infrastructure necessary to link between the programs and link between the partners. So we'll be thinking about how do we network demonstration sites so that lessons learned on one site are scalable and transferable to multiple sites. One of the things we heard from the METS sector is a big challenge they have in terms of getting innovation to the market is they can't get onto mine sites to test a prototype technology. So networking demonstration sites is a way of trying to provide technology companies with access to places where they can do pilot scale demonstrations of their innovations. We'll also be thinking hard about what we need in terms of a knowledge hub to capture all of the information, all of the data that already sits with our partners, and make it very transparent to a whole range of different stakeholders. So around the 3 programs is a cross-cutting platform, which at the moment we're calling collaboration infrastructure. And that's really kind of, I guess that's sort of where I wanted to leave a discussion of the CRC itself. The slide that's up now puts up the current sort of management team. So Bruce Kelly, many of you will know, came out of Rio Tinto, where he was general manager of the environment for many, many years, has been leading the efforts to get the CRC up, and is chairman of the board. Guy Boggs, who sits at the Western Australian Biodiversity Science Institute, he was at WOBSE, he's now with UWA as the CEO of the CRC, and the CRC will have a physical hub with Guy over in Perth. I'm down as the Research Director Designate, so that's basically coordinating the research planning and implementation program. And the CRC will also have a physical hub based here in Brisbane and staffed by me. And then, as you can see, we have a number of other people. So Glenn Corder from the Environment Centres is going to be leading Programme 3. Brian Maybe comes out of Curtin University in the WA School of Mines and will lead Programme 2. And Fiona Haslam-Mackenzie will lead the Regional Economic Development Programme, and she's from UWA. Jason Kirby is someone I've worked with for a long time. He's in CSRO Land and Water, and he will be working on shaping the collaboration infrastructure piece of the CRC. So what does this mean for researchers? What's the opportunity for researchers? Well, really, we're setting up a new client here for research. The CRC will be a new company, and it'll be a new company with of the order of $30 million a year to spend on delivering this vision of sustainable post-mining futures in mining areas, in regions that have to transition through mine closure over the next couple of decades. That $30 million a year is based on over 10 years. So it's a $130 million vehicle over 10 years. And that is made up of $30 million from the federal government and about $35 million from the industry and research partners in cash. But then there is also a huge amount of in-kind support that has been committed by the partners in the CRC. And it's really important not to underestimate the value of this, which means that we get access to mine sites. We have people in mining companies willing to put time into helping define, develop, and get us onto site. We have individuals within innovative mining equipment companies who want to be working with us and put time into conversations and innovation and development. And we have community representative bodies eager to sort of facilitate dialogue in the regions and host PhD researchers. So that green box in the pie chart there, we need to be careful not to underestimate the power and value of that, simply because it's not cold hard cash. I think for those of us who have spent our careers working in areas at the interface between disciplines, the CRC is dedicated to integrative and cross-disciplinary research. I think in my career, this is the largest entity I've come across that actually has as a core value integration and multidisciplinarity. And I guess the other opportunity for those researchers who are used to working in the environmental and social space around mining, where typically and often funding comes, great work is done, but it's done on a fairly small scale through bilateral agreements between maybe a mine site and the researcher. The CRC offers the potential to do something at scale, or to bring those individual activities into a place where we can create something where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. This next slide was just, I had a bit of fun on on the web yesterday. The kind of disciplines that are going to be relevant, the kind of things we're wanting to deliver are illustrated on this slide. At the centre is the Eden project in Cornwall, which is kind of a poster child really for successful post-mining future. Obviously that was an abandoned quarry that then got turned into a major tourist attraction, but it still makes a great story of the potential of some of these landscapes that are created through mining. Century Mine, where you have New Century Zinc moving in to see if they can do some more, kind of get some more value out of the mine site. And MMG had obviously done a pretty sophisticated closure plan for Century Mine before they before New Century came in. Kidston is up there, where you have this idea of a renewable energy hub that is sort of moving forward now as we speak. I'll put the picture of New Ackland Mine there on the right hand side. It's a great picture, this, but I do think it's the guy on the horse is in high vis, and he's on high vis because the land is still owned by New Hope, so it hasn't been relinquished. Mount Morgan, abandoned, big issue for the Queensland state government. I'll put some sulfate reducing bacteria in there because obviously the way we handle these landscapes has a lot of chemistry and processing and understanding biophysical and chemical interactions at landscape scale. Ore sorting in there, what can we do with ore sorting in order to not produce stuff that's going to cause long-term risks. Processing plants, coarse flotations, all of these things that we can do during mining can actually have an impact on our ability to get to a point where we can transfer a site back to a post-mining future. So a lot of this is about what's an acceptable residual risk for a mining company and how can we reduce that. So this was really just a montage to say, I don't want to pick out any particular disciplines. These are all highly, highly complex outcomes that we want to try and deliver from this CRC, and we need new ways of bringing our expertise and capability together to try and deliver them. My final slide, before you all rush to tell me what a great idea you've got that you'd like to be done under the CRC, is to say, please don't. At the moment, we are taking a bit of time to really plan out how we're going to develop our research portfolio over the next 18 months. At the moment, we are pre-CRC. We're doing a lot of work at the moment just to consolidate everything that we said we were going to do in the proposal, because we went through about 2 years of consultation to get to that proposal. So we're just, before Easter, we're taking the time to pull that together into a sort of research plan, which we can then take out for consultation after Easter. And what we want to do, we're not going to be calling for ideas. We're going to actually go out to consultation with all our partners and recalibrate priorities and key research themes. And that's from the research partners, the industry partners, the METS partners, and the regional community partners. And we'll use that to establish the first year of the CRC's operations, which I kind of see happening on two levels. There will be some foundational projects that we will need to do, but these foundational projects will be around benchmarking and baselining and aggregating information and road mapping. And that will run in parallel with what we see as a pretty intense program of strategy development through consultation to really identify the long-term research themes which we're going to focus on within the CRC. Our biggest danger is that we end up trying to, there's a phrase, boil the ocean, because we try and do too much and we end up just doing, not integrating at all. We end up propagating the current situation, which sees a lot of great work, but disaggregated and small scale. So do not expect there to be a call for proposals coming out soon, but please do start engaging with us in a conversation around how we're shaping up the research plan and how to get involved in the consultation going forward. And I think that's where I'll leave it. And I guess